In 1985, a local sheriff and his female deputy set out on a routine night patrol in rural Texas. They never made it back to the station. What followed became one of the longest unsolved disappearances in the state's history. But then, 16 years later, hikers stumbled across a strange, long-forgotten wooden structure in the mountains. When they looked inside, what they found at the bottom completely upended everything investigators had believed. The late-day sun cast long shadows over the dusty streets of Presidio, a small desert town near the Mexican border. Back in 2001, barely 3,000 people lived here, where privacy was scarce and rumors traveled fast. Beneath flickering fluorescent lights inside the tiny police station, Detective Simon Reyes sat immersed in paperwork. Another teenager had recently vanished, 17 years old, missing for 3 days, and time was slipping. He didn't even notice the sound of hurried footsteps until Officer Martinez burst through the door, drenched in sweat despite the air conditioning. "We just got a call from a park ranger in the Chinati Mountains. Hikers found a body, in uniform." Simon's head snapped up. "Another girl?" "No, sir, it's a law officer. Found in an old outdoor toilet. Ranger says it looks like it's been there a long time." Simon stood instantly, his chair screeching across the floor. "Pull the case file for Sheriff Ray Holbrook and Deputy Leia Ortega. That's the only missing officer's case we've got. This might finally be the break." Martinez nodded, his expression tense. Everyone in the department knew about the Holbrook-Ortega case. It was the department's ghost story, the one that never let go. As the station erupted with chatter, Simon spotted Detective Kara Dupont by the coffee machine. "Kara, we've got something. You're coming with me." She didn't hesitate, just grabbed her gear and followed. He then turned to 2 deputies prepping gear near the armory. "Deputy Carr, Deputy Maroro, you're in too." Debbie Carr, mid-30s, looked up, startled. Trish Maroro, younger, auburn hair tight in a bun, exchanged a glance with her partner. Simon noticed something pass between them. Unease? Fear? He remembered now. Back when Holbrook and Ortega went missing, Carr and Maroro were rookies. They had come forward later with disturbing claims, accusations of misconduct by Sheriff Holbrook. They hadn't dared speak up until after his disappearance. Their testimony had shifted the narrative. Holbrook may have abducted Ortega, possibly worse, before fleeing, but no one had ever been found. The team moved fast, loading into their vehicles. Martinez returned with the cold case file, its thick folder weathered by time. "Everything we have on the 85 case, sir." "Good," Simon said. "Fill me in on the drive." They hit the road, weaving through light traffic as the desert turned to rocky hills. Martinez read aloud, "Sheriff Ray Holbrook, 42, Deputy Leia Ortega, 25. Both last seen, October 15th, 1985, leaving the station for a standard patrol at 8:47 p.m. Their cruiser was found abandoned on Highway 67, keys still in the ignition. No signs of a struggle. Simon gripped the wheel, mind racing. What about the investigation? Searches covered miles. Nothing turned up. The FBI got involved. There were whispers about cartel activity nearby. Locals said Holbrook and Ortega had been asking questions about a string of disappearances. That night, they were planning to stop by the Dusty Spur Saloon, place known for truckers, and worse. The scenery shifted again as the road climbed higher, desert flattening into rugged peaks. Simon pulled out his phone and dialed a number he hadn't used in over a decade. "Mrs. Ortega? This is Detective Simon Reyes with the Presidio Police Department." The voice on the other end was older now, softer, but still waiting for answers. He remembered her voice, weathered by 16 years of silence and uncertainty. "Ma'am," Simon said gently, "I'm calling about your daughter's case. We've found something. It could be connected." There was a pause on the line. "Connected? You mean, is it Leia?" Marisol Ortega's voice trembled, caught between hope and dread. "We can't confirm that yet," Simon replied, "but I wanted to inform you personally. I'll have officers bring you to the site in the Chinati Mountains." After ending the call, Simon and the team followed the coordinates provided by the ranger, turning onto a rugged dirt road that wound higher into the mountains. Their patrol vehicles bounced and jolted over rock-strewn paths until, finally, they spotted a Park Service truck near a narrow trailhead where two figures were waiting. One of them, a weathered ranger in his 50s, stepped forward. "Detective Reyes, Bill Hutchkins. The hikers are just ahead with my partner, about a quarter-mile up this path." They grabbed their gear and followed Hutchkins along a rough trail that twisted through dense brush and loose stone. After 10 minutes of climbing, they reached a clearing. An old wooden outhouse stood silently at the edge. The structure looked forgotten by time, gray boards weathered, the door hanging slightly ajar. Two hikers stood nearby, an older couple, composed but visibly shaken. "I'm Detective Reyes," Simon said, approaching. "You're the ones who found it?" "Yes," the woman replied. "I'm Ruth Donnelly, and this is my husband Carl. We were trying out a new trail. Harder climb just to prove we still could." She smiled faintly. I stopped to use the facilities and dropped my glasses. "Prescription bifocals," Carl added with a chuckle. $600, Ruth continued. "I called Carl to help fish them out. He used a stick, but it was deep, completely dark." Carl stepped forward, pulling out a small flashlight attached to his keychain. "Old habit from my engineering days. I always carry this." When I shined it down there, I saw something that looked like leather. Then I realized it was a boot, and there was still a foot in it. "We left immediately to find the rangers," Ruth added. "Didn't touch anything else." Ranger Hutchkins picked up the story. "When I got here, we carefully removed the seat to get a better look. That's when we saw the uniform, the badge, and what looks like a service revolver. We haven't touched anything since." Simon and Dupont approached the outhouse, both slipping on gloves. The structure was basic, a box of rough boards above a deep pit, but as Simon aimed his flashlight down, the beam caught something that made his breath hitch. A body. Preserved by time and the dry mountain air, the figure lay partially mummified in layers of compacted waste. The fabric of a uniform was still visible. A badge, dulled by time, clung to the chest, and from the side, the handle of a revolver peeked out of a leather holster. Simon turned to the team. "We'll need to extract the body carefully. Get a forensic crew up here and a team with tools. We'll have to dismantle part of the structure." As they waited, Simon questioned Hutchkins about the area. "This trail was officially closed back in '92, the ranger explained. "Landslides, unstable rock. We pulled the markers, stopped maintenance. Honestly, I'm surprised anyone even found this place." Carl added, "We spotted it on an old topographic map. Thought it'd be an adventure." Within the hour, forensic specialists and laborers arrived with equipment. Piece by piece, they took apart the floor, slowly expanding the opening without disturbing the remains. Every board was lifted with care. When they finally brought the body out, Dr. Patricia Chen, the medical examiner, crouched beside it. The dry air and sealed conditions down there created a near-perfect environment for natural preservation, she said, gently brushing away layers of debris. Some tissues stayed intact far longer than expected. She uncovered the badge and examined it closely. The number was still readable. She read it aloud. Martinez checked the case file, his voice low. "That's Sheriff Holbrook's badge number." A silence fell over the group as the realization hit. If this was Sheriff Holbrook, then everything they thought they knew about the 1985 disappearance was wrong. Simon turned slowly, his gaze falling on deputies Carr and Maroro, both now standing frozen, wide-eyed. Standing a short distance from the others, deputies Carr and Maroro were visibly shaken. Debbie's face was streaked with tears, while Trish held herself tightly, arms wrapped as if trying to fend off a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. The sound of an approaching vehicle broke the silence. Simon turned as Marisol Ortega stepped out of a patrol car, supported gently by a young officer. 16 years of uncertainty had left their mark, her back slightly hunched, hair grayer than he remembered, but her eyes remained sharp, scanning the scene for truth. Simon moved quickly to meet her before she could get too close. "Mrs. Ortega, I need to be honest with you. We found remains, but they don't belong to Leia." Her expression flickered between hope and dread. "Not Leia? Then who?" "We believe it's Sheriff Holbrook, from everything we've gathered. He's likely been here since the night they both disappeared." Marisol's knees buckled, and Simon helped her lower onto a nearby boulder. Her voice broke. "If that's true, if something happened to him here, then what happened to my baby? Oh God, what could they have done to her?" Simon crouched beside her, his tone careful. "This discovery changes everything. We don't know who's responsible yet. It may have been someone else entirely. Or—" He hesitated, not wanting to finish the thought. But Marisol didn't need him to. "No," she said firmly. "My daughter was a good officer. She believed in justice. If Holbrook is dead, then someone did this to both of them. She didn't run. She didn't hurt anyone. Someone silenced her too." Simon turned to Ranger Hutchkins. "How many outhouses like this are still up here?" The ranger thought for a moment. "On old trails? Maybe a dozen within 5 miles. More if you count the ones still in use." "Get teams searching every single one," Simon ordered. "If someone chose this location, they knew it was abandoned. They knew how remote it was. This wasn't a random choice. It was calculated. They expected the pit to be emptied and the body to vanish into the system, but the trail was shut down. The system never came. Forensics continued collecting samples. Despite contamination, anything could help. Simon glanced toward Deputy's car and Marraro. They were still clinging to each other, tears falling freely. He excused himself and walked over. "You two holding up?" Debbie wiped her cheeks. "It's just seeing him like that. Even knowing what he did, no one deserves that." Trish nodded, her voice unsteady. "It brings everything back. Everything we tried to forget." Simon studied them both. Something in their reaction didn't sit right, but he couldn't quite place it. "Take a few days," he said. "Go home. We'll reach out if we need anything." Gratefully, the deputies nodded and started back down the trail, escorted by another officer. Simon returned to Marisol. "We're doing a full search of the area," he assured her. "We won't stop until we know what happened." She rose slowly, her strength worn thin. "After today, I think I need to start preparing myself. 16 years of not knowing. Maybe it's time to stop hoping. If something like that happened to Leia, I don't want to see it. I want to remember her the way she was." "I understand," Simon said gently. "Let me drive you home. Dupont can take over here." Dupont gave a nod. "We've got it covered." Simon gathered the evidence, issued final instructions, and guided Marisol down the winding trail. Behind them, the crumbling outhouse stood silent, a weathered witness to a truth long buried, and perhaps one of many still hidden in these hills. Later that evening, after dropping Marisol at her small home on the south edge of Presidio, Detective Simon Reyes drove back through quiet streets that felt even emptier than usual. It was as if the truth uncovered in the mountains had cast a shadow over the entire town. The dashboard clock read 7:23 p.m. when he pulled into the station. Inside, the night shift had taken over, but the tension of the day still clung to desks littered with coffee cups and hastily scribbled notes. Simon returned to his desk and opened the case file that had haunted the department for over a decade and a half. Under the sterile light, he spread the reports across the surface. But now, for the first time in years, He read them with new perspective. Sheriff Holbrook's body changed everything. What if Laya hadn't been a victim? What if she'd been involved? It was a hard question, but one he had to ask. Still, he couldn't imagine her doing something like that alone. Holbrook had been a large man, experienced, dangerous. She would have needed help. Simon traced the timeline. The summer of 1985 had been marked by a series of disappearances, 3 young women gone without a trace. Holbrook and Ortega had been investigating, and their reports showed growing concern. By October, they were circling something serious, something tied to the Dusty Spur Saloon. Simon flipped to the witness accounts from that night, October 15, 1985, the last time anyone had seen either of them. The bartender, Miguel Vasquez, had served them both around 9:30 p.m. That's when things started to unravel. The bartender had remembered serving them, Sheriff Holbrook and Deputy Ortega, and recalled how they'd asked questions about the truckers who regularly stopped by. But no one reported any argument, no suspicious behavior. The last confirmed sighting was at 11:15 p.m., when they paid their tab and left. After that, nothing. Simon rubbed his eyes, now heavy with exhaustion. Back in 1985, there were no security cameras, no GPS data, no phone records to trace. Everything hinged on memory, and suddenly, those old statements seemed far less reliable. He flipped through the notes again. The surrounding motels had been searched, but no one had seen the sheriff or the deputy check in. No one reported hearing or seeing anything unusual near the stretch of highway where their cruiser was later found. Keys in the ignition, doors locked, not a sign of struggle. It was as if they had simply vanished into the night. The sound of footsteps made him glance up. Detective Kara DuPont stood in the doorway, her face drawn from the long day. "The Rangers finished checking the other outhouses," she said, lowering herself into a chair across from him. "Nothing. If there are more victims out there, they're not in the abandoned sites we know about." Simon leaned back, his chair creaking beneath him. 16 years, Kara. Holbrook was down there the whole time, while we searched every other lead. "The forensics team's still working," she said, checking her watch. "They'll be at it most of the night. But you need sleep. This case waited 16 years. It can wait one more night." Simon offered a tired nod, but he wasn't ready to leave. "I'll stay a little longer. I keep feeling like I'm missing something." DuPont stretched and stood. "Don't stay too late," she said. "You won't solve it all in one night." And then she was gone. Simon tried to refocus, but the words on the reports blurred together. His stomach reminded him he'd skipped lunch in the rush. The station was quiet now, just a dispatcher and 2 patrol officers left. He finally gave in, locking the case file in his drawer and heading downstairs to the forensics lab. "I'm going to grab dinner," he told the techs. "Call me if anything comes up." Outside, the cool October air was a welcome change. Simon sat behind the wheel of his car, considering where to eat. Murphy's Diner? Or, his eyes drifted east, toward a bar that had haunted the case from the beginning, the Dusty Spur Saloon. It was still open after all these years. Curiosity got the better of him. He started the engine and drove through the dim streets of Presidio, past closed storefronts and silent homes. When he reached the saloon, the gravel lot held a few pickups and long-haul trucks. Not packed, but not empty either. The neon sign still blinked faintly, red and blue shadows dancing across the dirt. Inside, little had changed. The jukebox played a slow country tune. The air smelled like beer, grease, and old cigarette smoke. Truckers filled the booths and tables, some with maps and shipping papers scattered between drinks. Simon took a seat at the bar. Conversation dipped slightly as he entered, his badge making him stand out. He ignored the stares. The bartender was young, maybe mid-20s, with slicked back hair, and the kind of look that said he didn't want trouble. Definitely not the Miguel Vasquez from the case files. "What can I get you, officer?" the young man asked. "Detective," Simon corrected. "Bourbon neat." And a burger, if the kitchen's still open. Sure thing. As the bartender poured the drink, Simon asked casually, "How long you been working here?" "About 3 years. I was wondering about the guy who used to run the bar, Miguel Vasquez." The young man froze for just a second. "Miguel? He left about a decade ago. One day he just quit. Didn't say why. Any idea where he went?" "Nope. Moved out of his place? Didn't leave a number." The owner tried to send him a final paycheck, but he was gone. The bartender slid the drink across the counter. "I'll put in that burger." Simon took a slow sip, letting the warmth settle as he scanned the room. Most of the clientele looked like long haulers, drivers who regularly crossed the border. When the bartender returned, Simon asked, "These guys mostly come in from Mexico?" The answer was vague. "Some from Mexico, some local. We get drivers from all over, produce companies, warehouses, manufacturing stuff." But Simon caught something else. The bartender's eyes flicked toward a corner booth where 4 men sat quietly, all staring at their drinks, until they realized Simon was watching. Then they stared back. Other patrons who'd arrived after Simon were eyeing him too. Low murmurs spread across the room. The atmosphere had changed. Simon finished his burger, left cash on the bar, and headed for the door. As he pushed it open, he glanced back. The bartender was speaking quietly to the men at the corner table. All of them were watching him leave. Back in his car, Simon sat for a moment, engine off. Something about that place felt wrong. Not just a bar. It was a hub, a meeting point, maybe even a cover for something else. And his presence had disrupted whatever they were used to keeping quiet. As Simon pulled out of the dusty Spurs gravel lot, unease gnawed at him. He flipped on the dome light inside his cruiser and reached for the case file beside him, thumbing through faded witness statements until he found it, Miguel Vasquez's old address from the original 1985 report. 59 Cedar Avenue, just a few blocks from the bar. Tomorrow, he'd head over with DuPont, see if any neighbors remembered the man or had heard where he'd gone. But for now, fatigue was hitting hard. The high from the mountain discovery had finally worn off, replaced with a heavy mental fog. He turned west toward home. The streets were quiet, just a few trucks and delivery vans moving through the sleeping town. Then he noticed it. Headlights in his rearview mirror, a dark sedan, maybe a Chevy or Ford, following a few car lengths behind. Not unusual on its own, this was a main road, but when Simon made a series of casual turns through town, the car mirrored each one. Left onto Mosque Street, another left onto 3rd Avenue, and when he suddenly veered right onto Desert View without signaling, the sedan followed, turn signal flashing in perfect sync. His grip tightened on the wheel. 20 years in law enforcement had taught him when to trust his instincts, and every signal in his brain was now on high alert. He considered calling it in, but what would he report? A car just happening to make the same turns? He needed something more concrete. Up ahead, the Chevron station on Palm Street still burned bright under its floodlights. Simon swung into the lot, pulling up to a pump and pretending to scroll his phone. The sedan slowed as it neared the station, then passed by without stopping. But in that moment, Simon caught a glimpse of the driver. Hispanic male. Baseball cap pulled low, face obscured. The vehicle, a dark blue Chevy Malibu, probably late 90s. No plate he could clearly make out. He sat at the pump another 5 minutes, watching the road. But the car didn't circle back, probably just jumpy, he thought. After the way the truckers had looked at him in the bar, he couldn't shake the feeling that someone hadn't liked his presence. He turned back onto Palm Street, following his usual route home. But 10 minutes later, as he turned onto his block, his breath caught in his throat. There it was. That same dark blue Malibu, parked just 3 houses down from his own. No lights, no engine, just sitting there in the dark. Simon slowed, scanning the house it was parked in front of, 47 Cedar Avenue, windows dark, no porch light, no movement. He rolled his window halfway down, listening. Crickets, a dog barking far off, the hum of AC units, then a sharp crack, glass, followed by a muffled voice, low, urgent, coming from inside the house. Simon grabbed his radio. Unit 23 to dispatch. I'm at 47 Cedar Avenue. Heard possible disturbance, breaking glass, shouting, conducting a wellness check. Copy, Unit 23. Backup available if needed. Standing by. He knew backup would be at least 15 minutes out. He was on his own. Approaching the house, his hand rested near his sidearm, but he didn't draw it. He rang the bell. No answer. Knocked hard. Police! Everything all right in there? Footsteps. Then the door opened. A man in his 40s stood there. Hispanic. Jeans. White undershirt. Calm voice. Tired eyes. Evening, officer. Everything's fine. Simon kept his tone steady. Heard glass breaking. Sounded like someone was shouting. What happened? The man exhaled. Ah, yeah. I knocked over my wife's vase, the one her mom gave her. She was pretty upset. You know how sentimental some things can be. Is your wife here? I'd like to speak with her. Make sure she's okay. She's in the bathroom cleaning up. Got a little emotional. It meant a lot to her. But the man never stepped aside, still blocking the doorway. Simon leaned slightly, trying to see past him. Inside, the house was dark, but in the dim light, he could make out a shape on the sofa. Someone was sitting there, still, too still. Sir, who else is in the house with you? Just me and my wife, like I said. But that figure on the couch hadn't moved once. Simon's instincts screamed at him, but without probable cause, he had no legal grounds to enter, no visible injuries, no verified threat. He had to play it by the book. He keyed his radio. Unit 23. Resident states incident was a broken vase. Domestic situation appears resolved. I'm clearing. Copy, Unit 23. Simon stepped back. All right, sir. Sorry for the disturbance. Hope you two have a better night. Sure thing, officer. The man closed the door. Simon walked slowly to his car, every nerve on edge. He slid into the driver's seat, took one long breath, then pulled out his phone. He called DuPont directly. Simon? She answered, groggy. Everything okay? I'm sorry to wake you, he said quietly, but I think we've got a situation. Something's off, Simon muttered, the image of that motionless figure on the couch lingering in his mind. If his wife was in the bathroom, who was that sitting in the living room? DuPont was instantly alert. You think it's connected to the Holbrook case? The timing's too perfect, Simon said. I revisit the last place Holbrook was seen, and suddenly I'm being followed. Then I wind up at a house on the same street where Miguel Vasquez used to live. Could be coincidence, DuPont offered, though even she didn't sound convinced. In this town? Simon shook his head. We both know better. He started the car. Can you meet me? I want to circle back, keep eyes on the area tonight. Give me 15, she said. I'll meet you at the Chevron on Palm. Copy. I'll wait. Simon pulled out, heading for the station lot. When he drove past Cedar Avenue again, the blue Malibu was gone, but he knew that wasn't the end of it. Whatever he'd stepped into back at the dusty spur, someone clearly didn't want it dug up. 12 minutes later, DuPont's personal vehicle pulled into the gas station. She stepped out wearing jeans, a jacket, and a shoulder holster, ready for whatever the night had in store. Brought backup, she said with a smirk, handing him a travel mug. Figured we'd need the caffeine. Simon took it gratefully. Thanks. Something's happening, Kara. I can feel it. Then let's find out what, she said, checking her sidearm. Where to? Back to Cedar Avenue. I want another look at that house. They drove together through the sleeping streets of Presidio. The dashboard clock read 10:47 p.m., long past bedtime for most of the quiet town. As they rolled up to the house, Simon slowed. That's strange. The Malibu was gone. The house at 47 Cedar stood dark and silent, as if no one had ever been there at all. Simon pulled over across the street, eyes scanning the row of houses. Something wasn't right. "Kara, look at the numbers," he said. The bartender's address in the file was 59 Cedar, but count the houses. They did. 45, 47, 49, 51, then a gap. The next house jumped to 61. "There's no 59, DuPont said. "That's not right. Let's check closer." They got out, flashlights cutting through the darkness. The desert air carried a hint of creosote, dry and cold. Simon approached the dark house where he'd done the wellness check. "Look at this," he said, shining his light on the house number. "The numbers are newer than the paint." Closer inspection revealed faint marks beneath the 47, shadows of different digits. "This was changed recently," he muttered. DuPont keyed her radio. "Dispatch, this is Detective DuPont, requesting a property records check on 59 Cedar Avenue. Current number shows as 47, but it may have been altered." "Copy that," came the reply. While waiting, they circled the property. No lights, no sound. Whoever had been inside was gone. "Simon," DuPont called from the side yard. "Over here." He joined her, crouched beside a ceramic planter. She was pointing at something lying in the dirt, a small silver pin, a butterfly, detailed with rhinestones. They both pulled on gloves. DuPont picked it up gently, turning it in the light. "I've seen Deputy Debbie wear these," she said. "She has a collection, different one every day. Said her grandmother started it." "You're sure? Positive?" Simon felt a chill settle in his gut. He sealed the pin into an evidence bag. "Let's try calling her." DuPont dialed. Nothing. Straight to voicemail. "Try Trish." Same result. Then dispatch came through the radio. Records confirm 59 Cedar Avenue last registered to Miguel Vasquez in 1985. No property activity recorded after 1991 due to filing backlog. Current listing shows Juan Delgado as occupant. Moved in 3 months ago. 3 months ago, Simon repeated, right around when the house number got switched. "Too convenient to ignore," DuPont said. "We need to check on Debbie and Trish." "Trish lives closer," Simon said, already walking. "Sage Street, 6 blocks. They jumped into the patrol car. The drive was short, but Simon's unease kept growing. As they turned onto Sage Street, he spotted it immediately. Trish Mororo's small adobe house. Quiet. Still. But something was wrong. "The front door," DuPont whispered, unbuckling her holster. "It's open." Simon killed the headlights and rolled to a stop. Both detectives stepped out, hands near their weapons. The porch light flickered faintly above them. The door hung half open, just wide enough to suggest someone had left in a hurry, or someone was waiting. Simon motioned to DuPont. No words needed. They approached silently. They parked down the street and approached carefully, hands resting near their weapons. The front door to Trish Mororo's home was ajar, just enough to sway gently in the breeze. "Deputy Mororo," Simon called out. "It's Detective Reyes. Everything all right?" Silence. He and DuPont exchanged a glance. Then Simon pushed the door open with his flashlight. The beam immediately caught something on the tile floor just inside. Blood. He grabbed his radio. "Dispatch, we have a possible crime scene at 312 Sage Street. Blood visible in the entryway. Requesting backup and forensics." "Copy. Units en route," came the reply. They moved inside, now fully alert, weapons drawn. A trail of blood led from the front hall, winding down the corridor, droplets and long smears suggesting someone had been dragged. The house was silent. The only sound was the faint tick of a clock somewhere in the dark. Room by room, they cleared the house. The living room, empty, but a lamp was overturned. The kitchen, cluttered but untouched. Dishes still in the sink, but no signs of struggle until they reached the master bedroom. The scene inside was different. Bedding had been pulled loose and twisted across the mattress. There were more bloodstains on the carpet, and the sliding glass door leading to the small backyard stood wide open, but no sign of Trish, no body, just traces of a fight. She fought, DuPont muttered, scanning the disheveled room. Didn't go quietly. Simon holstered his weapon and tried calling both deputies again, still straight to voicemail. More officers arrived and began securing the home. Crime scene techs set to work documenting and collecting the evidence. Simon paced the living room, his thoughts racing. "This connects to Holbrook," he said. "We find his body this morning. And now both deputies who testified against him vanish in one night." DuPont nodded. "And the bartender, what was his name? You said he was talking to a group of truckers?" "Yeah," Simon said, suddenly remembering. "Back at the Dusty Spur, he was whispering with a group in the corner, kept glancing at me. Then they left right after I did." He grabbed his radio again. "Dispatch, this is Detective Reyes. I need an immediate bolo. Shut down all routes leaving Presidio. No trucks, repeat, no commercial vehicles are to leave town until further notice." "That's a big request, Detective," Dispatch replied. "We have 2 missing officers," Simon cut in, "and a likely connection to cross-border operations. Set up checkpoints. Highway 67, every farm road. Nothing moves without inspection. Copy. Checkpoints being implemented now." He turned to DuPont. "Those truckers know something, and if they're trying to move Debbie and Trish out of town, we're running out of time." "The Dusty Spur," DuPont said. Simon nodded. "Let's go." They left the house under the supervision of the responding officers and raced back to their cruiser. Every second mattered now. When they pulled into the Dusty Spur's gravel lot, the parking area still held several semis and pickups. From outside, the dim glow of the jukebox filtered through the dirty windows, but inside, the mood had changed. Conversations stopped mid-sentence as soon as the patrol car's lights lit up the lot. Simon entered first, DuPont at his side. Willie Nelson played softly from the jukebox, but the room had fallen tense. Several men near the back shifted in their seats. A few turned away. The young bartender from earlier froze mid-wipe behind the bar, hands trembling slightly when he saw them approaching. "We need to talk," Simon said flatly. "Now?" the bartender asked, eyes wide. "I don't know anything." His answer was too quick. "No one's accusing you of anything," DuPont said, stepping forward. "Not yet, but 2 officers are missing. You were seen talking to a group of men who left right after Detective Reyes." She let her words settle. "We can do this here, in front of everyone, or we can talk somewhere private." The bartender's eyes darted around the bar, but no one came to his aid. With no allies, no exit options, he sighed. "There's an office in the back." They followed him past the restrooms, down a narrow hallway into a cluttered little room that smelled like old cigarettes and spilled beer. Stacks of receipts and crumpled invoices covered the desk. Metal filing cabinets lined the walls. Simon shut the door behind them as DuPont positioned herself near it, one hand resting near her weapon. "What's your name?" Simon asked. Carlos Mendoza." "Okay, Carlos." Simon leaned casually against the desk, but his voice was all business. "Here's what we've got. We're investigating a series of disappearances in Presidio County. Young women. Years of cases that now appear linked to trafficking and organized transport." Carlos stayed silent. "In a town this small," Simon continued, "if anything illegal's moving through it, someone at the local watering hole is going to know. And you, serving drinks, overhearing things, you'd be in a position to pick up a lot." Carlos shook his head. "I just pour drinks, man. I don't ask questions." "That's exactly the problem," DuPont cut in. "Not asking questions when you know something's going on makes you part of the problem. But helping us now?" She leaned forward. "That makes you a witness. There's a big difference between accessory and cooperating." Carlos looked at both of them, sweat forming at his brow. He was cracking. Simon waited. Simon watched Carlos wrestle with his choices, sweat beading on his brow despite the cool desert air. "You still have time to land on the right side of this," Simon said calmly but firmly. "But if we connect you to a trafficking network, and we will, you'll go down with the rest of them. You can be a witness or a defendant. Your call." Carlos finally broke. Okay. Look, I don't know everything. My job? They pay me extra to keep an eye out for law enforcement. DEA, police, border guys, anyone official. If someone like you walks in, I let certain people know." "Which people?" Simon asked. "There's this group, truckers, but they're not the regular type. They drive up from Ojinaga." "Ojinaga, Chihuahua?" DuPont clarified. "Across the border?" Carlos nodded and wiped his face with a bar towel. "I just give a signal when there's heat. Then they pass it along." "What do they call themselves?" Simon asked. "I heard them say Los Transportistas, the transporters. Not exactly original." Carlos attempted a weak laugh, which quickly faded. "They roll through here maybe twice a week, always different trucks, but the same handful of guys leading them." Simon leaned in. "What are they moving?" Carlos hesitated, his eyes drifting to the floor. "I didn't ask. You don't ask questions if you want to stay alive. But there were rumors." "Like what?" DuPont pressed. "Drugs, sure, everyone assumes that. But sometimes—" Carlos paused, clearly struggling. "Sometimes I'd see them with young women, not like workers. They were scared. American girls. Teenagers, maybe early 20s, either high or terrified, sometimes both." Simon clenched his jaw. "And you never thought to report that?" "To who?" Carlos shot back, voice rising with sudden bitterness. "You think you're the first officers to come through here? Some of them looked the other way, might have been on the payroll for all I know. How was I supposed to know who I could trust?" Simon paused. The pieces were falling into place. Debbie and Trish had made enemies years ago, and now those enemies might be circling back. "Do you keep anything here?" DuPont asked. "Drugs? Evidence?" "No, I swear on my mother's grave. Nothing in the bar. That's not my thing. I just watch and report. That's it." Simon and DuPont exchanged a look. Carlos was small time, maybe just a cog, but tonight he might be the one lead they had. "You're coming with us," Simon said. "We need a formal statement, and you're going to help us ID these guys from photos." Carlos nodded, defeated. "Am I under arrest?" "That depends," DuPont said flatly. "Right now you're a witness. Keep cooperating, and it stays that way." They escorted him back through the bar. Many patrons had already left. The few who remained avoided eye contact, staring at their drinks like they hadn't heard a word. 2 uniformed officers were waiting near the entrance. They took Carlos into custody for protective transport. Outside, Simon jumped on the radio, issuing updates to multiple agencies. "We need Border Patrol footage. Any trucks that crossed in the last few hours. I want visual IDs and plate numbers now." Checkpoint officers were alerted. Vehicles coming from Ojinaga needed to be stopped and inspected, but the clock was ticking. "Dispatch," Simon said. "Get me a direct line to the Ojinaga police. Patch in the DEA and FBI regional offices. We're dealing with possible international transport involving American citizens." DuPont was already on her phone, speaking with border authorities. "If they crossed before the alert went out," she said as she climbed into the patrol car, "they're already in Mexico." "Then we follow," Simon answered grimly. They sped toward the Presidio Ojinaga International Bridge, sirens silent but urgency burning. It took 15 minutes to reach the crossing, Simon pushing the cruiser hard while DuPont coordinated response teams by phone and radio. The bridge rose ahead, a strip of bright lights cutting through the desert night. On the U.S. side, customs agents had established a special screening checkpoint as requested. An agent met them as they arrived. "Detective Reyes. We checked camera footage. A Freightliner semi crossed at 11:02 p.m., about 8 minutes before your alert went out. Mexican plates, registered to a logistics company in Ojinaga. That's our truck, Simon said. What's the protocol for crossing? The agent handed over a tablet showing a still frame of the truck passing through the checkpoint. The FBI and DEA are already in contact with Mexican authorities, because this involves potential abduction of U.S. law enforcement. It's being handled under bilateral cooperation rules. Mexican federal police will take lead. You'll be allowed to assist. Simon nodded. Then we go now. Within minutes, a convoy was assembled. Black SUVs carrying federal agents, DEA vehicles, and units from Mexican law enforcement who had crossed to provide an escort. Thanks to emergency protocols established after NAFTA, the paperwork was fast-tracked. In cases involving missing American officers, red tape disappeared. As they crossed the bridge into Mexico, the Rio Grande a dark ribbon beneath them, Simon felt a shift deep in his chest. They were leaving U.S. soil behind. Now they were guests, operating on trust and time, and both were quickly running out. On the Ojinaga side of the border, they were met by Captain Roberto Hernandez, a seasoned officer with silver streaks at his temples and a firm handshake. His English was fluent and direct. "Detective Reyes," he said, "we've been tracking the vehicle. Surveillance followed it to Calle Revol in the Zona Rosa district." The red light zone, DuPont translated quietly, though Simon already knew. "The truck is parked outside a place called La Rosa de Fuego, the Rose of Fire," Hernandez continued. "It's on our radar. We've been collecting intelligence for months, cartel-linked. We hadn't acted yet, but your missing officers changed that." The convoy rolled into Ojinaga's winding streets, narrower and more crowded than Presidio. Dilapidated buildings leaned against each other. Dirt alleys branched off between shops and bars. As they neared the Zona Rosa, everything shifted. The glow of neon signs, pulsing music, and women in glittering outfits calling out from doorways. Calle Revol was a narrow strip of chaos, lined with massage parlors, underground bars, and illegal brothels. Parked right in front of a garish pink building with a flickering rose sign was the Freightliner semi. Even now, at this late hour, the place was busy. Captain Hernandez coordinated with sharp military precision. "We hit every entrance simultaneously. DEA handles narcotics. My officers will detain Mexican nationals. FBI assists with any Americans. Detective Reyes, your team focuses on recovering your officers." The operation began in seconds. Simon heard the shout, "Policía Federal!" just before they breached the building. Chaos erupted inside. Patrons scrambled. Furniture shattered. Voices rose in panic. The bar was dense with smoke, noise, and flashing lights. Simon and DuPont moved room to room, clearing each narrow space. Behind one door, they found several young women, some drugged, others wide-eyed with fear. In a back office, DEA agents were already bagging what looked like heroin. Nearby, Mexican federal police had several men face down on the floor, some of whom Simon immediately recognized from the dusty spur. "Simon!" DuPont's voice echoed from upstairs. He ran, taking the steps 2 at a time, and found her in a small room at the end of the hall. On a stained mattress sat Deputies Debbie Carr and Trish Maroro. Their uniforms were still on, though wrinkled and dirty. Their faces were pale, streaked with tears. "Thank God," Trish whispered. "We thought no one would come. We thought we were gone." "Get them out of here," Simon said to DuPont. "I'll keep searching. There might be more." Room by room, he moved through the rest of the upper floor. Most of the spaces were now empty, either cleared or abandoned, but at the very last door, he stopped. Inside, sitting on the edge of a creaky bed, was a woman in a cheap silk robe. Her hair was pulled back, her makeup smudged. She looked exhausted, older than she was, worn down by time. But Simon knew that face. 16 years had passed, but there was no mistaking her. "Deputy Laya Ortega," he said softly. Across the room, a man had begun climbing out the window, abandoning his client the moment sirens blared. But Laya didn't move. She just stared at Simon, part shock, part shame. "Ma'am," he said gently, stepping into the room, then switching to Spanish. "Señora, soy el detective Simon Reyes, Departamento de Policía." "I speak English," she said, her voice low, flat. "What are American police doing here?" "I've been working your missing persons case," Simon said, slowly closing the distance. "You're Laya Ortega, and you've been gone a long time." She blinked, disbelieving. "You're too late." 16 years too late. "It's never too late," Simon said softly, pulling out his radio. "DuPont, Debbie, and Trish are safe. Keep them secure. I need a few minutes." He gently closed the door behind him and sat on a rickety wooden chair across from her. "I know this isn't how you imagined being found," he said, "but you were a respected deputy once, and you still deserve dignity." Laya let out a bitter laugh, gesturing around the dim, crumbling room. "Dignity? Look at this place. Look at me. I'm exactly the kind of person we used to arrest." "You're a survivor," Simon said, "and this wasn't your choice. This morning, we found Holbrook. His body was in an abandoned outhouse in the Chinati Mountains. We know now, you didn't vanish willingly." The mention of Holbrook's name broke something in her. "You found Ray?" Her voice cracked. "In uniform, still armed. He's been there all along." Laya covered her face. Her shoulders trembled. "My mom, does she know?" "She never stopped looking," Simon said. "She never gave up." "Not once," Laya broke down, sobbing. "I thought about her every day, every night. But how can I go back? After this, after all I've done?" Simon remained seated, composed but gentle. "What you've done is survive. That's enough. She'll want you home. She wants her daughter back." The door opened, and DuPont stepped in quietly. "Debbie and Trish are being treated. The medics are with them. Other American women are being processed too." Simon nodded, then turned back to Laya. "We'll get you checked out. And then, if you're ready, we'll bring your mom here. Presidio's just 30 minutes away." Laya looked lost. "She's probably sleeping. It's so late." Simon offered the faintest smile. "I don't think she's had a full night's sleep in 16 years. And for the first time, Laya Ortega allowed herself to hope that maybe, just maybe, she could go home. "Would you like me to call her?" Laya stared at him for a long moment, then gave the faintest nod. "Yes, please. I need my mother." Simon helped her gather the few worn belongings she owned. Downstairs, the scene was controlled chaos. Mexican officers logging detainees, DEA teams bagging narcotics, FBI agents triaging potential trafficking victims. Through it all, Simon kept himself between Laya and the curious stares, safeguarding what dignity she had left. Outside, paramedics had set up a pop-up triage station under glaring floodlights. Laya was checked first, dehydrated, exhausted, but stable. Debbie Carr and Trish Marrero were cleared for transport as well, though all three women would need full medical workups later. Simon stepped away to phone Marisol Ortega, knowing the call would change that woman's life forever. Behind him, in the neon-washed night of Ojinaga's darkest district, 3 American deputies, each lost to a different kind of darkness, had finally been found. The broader investigation was just beginning, but for now, they were safe. The station was a squat concrete box smelling of strong coffee and disinfectant. Because the case now spanned 2 countries, Captain Hernandez arranged for initial interviews to be done on Mexican soil before the Americans were escorted back to Presidio. Simon guided Laya into a stark interview room. 1 metal table, 3 chairs, nothing else. She wrapped shaky fingers around a steaming cup of coffee, wearing a clean shirt and pants loaned by the Mexican Red Cross. She looked as though the smallest breeze might break her. "I want to be clear," Simon began, setting a recorder on the table. "You are not under arrest. You're a victim. But I need to understand what happened 16 years ago and what's happened since. Can you walk me through it?" Laya nodded, voice barely above a whisper. "Where do you want me to start?" "The beginning. October 15th, 1985. Your investigation. Your relationship with Sheriff Holbrook. Everything." She drew in a shaky breath. "Ray and I were chasing leads on 3 missing girls from Presidio County. Everyone suspected trafficking routes. We'd been getting closer for weeks. Ray was my field training officer. Tough, old school, but decent. Despite what people said later, he never crossed a line with me or anyone else." She sipped her coffee, eyes distant. "That night we went to the Dusty Spur. An informant said certain truckers might talk if we blended in. We got there around 9:30. The place was packed. We split up to ask casual questions. Ray ordered 2 beers so we'd look like regulars." Her expression darkened. "I'd barely touched mine when the room started spinning. Ray was gripping the bar, trying not to fall. We'd been drugged, something like Rohypnol. We staggered outside, aiming for the patrol car, but they were waiting." "Who?" Simon asked. 4 men. I knew one, Raul Espinoza, El Lobo. He ran the corridor between Presidio and Ojinaga. Even half-conscious, Ray tried to fight. He actually got his gun out, but the drugs slowed him. They beat him with tire irons, and when he still wouldn't stay down, El Lobo shot him. Twice. Simon kept his face neutral, taking notes. They panicked when someone inside called the police. They threw me in a van and loaded Ray's body in a truck. That's when another patrol unit arrived, Debbie and Trish. Laya's hands trembled. They weren't in on it before that night, I'm sure, but El Lobo was slick. Everyone knew about Debbie's gambling debts, Trish's son's hospital bills. He offered them money to keep quiet, to buy time to clean up. They agreed. They helped hide Ray's body in that mountain outhouse, figured the waste service would remove it and no one would know. "And the story about Ray harassing them?" Simon asked softly. "A cover. Make him look like the villain who ran off with me. Discredit any investigation." Simon exhaled, the pieces finally clicking. Debbie and Trish hadn't planned a crime. They'd been bought into one. Laya's composure faltered as the memories poured out. "They took me straight to Ojinaga," she whispered, tears welling. "After that, it was years of being moved from one place to another. I was forced to work off a so-called debt that never disappeared. I stopped counting the times I tried to escape." She wiped her eyes with the sleeve of her borrowed shirt. "I thought about my mom every day, but after so long, shame kept me silent." Simon leaned forward, voice gentle. "You survived. That's what matters. Your mother never stopped believing you were out there. She's on her way right now." Laya let out a breath that was half laugh, half sob. "Is it really that easy? Just go home?" "It won't be easy," Simon said, "but it's possible. And it starts tonight." Beyond the interview room door, the Joint Task Force was already drafting warrants, scheduling extraditions, and preparing to dismantle the network that had thrived in the shadows for more than a decade. But in this moment, in a plain concrete station smelling of coffee and bleach, the most important victory was a single whispered word of hope. Home. They burned my ID, kept me sedated for weeks. Laya's voice faltered. "The things they did..." She stopped, swallowing hard. "They broke me, Detective. Physically, mentally, what they did to me." For a long moment she couldn't go on. Then quietly, "By the time the drugs wore off and I understood where I was too far gone to fight. They gave me a new name, Lucia, and put me to work in their brothel." Simon hesitated before asking, "In 16 years, you never tried to escape?" Her expression turned bitter. "With what? I had no ID, no money, No way to prove who I really was. The brothel was locked down. The girls who ran tried it. They ended up as examples, beaten or worse. Eventually, you start to believe this is who you are, that you deserve it. Simon sat quietly, taking it in. Your photo was never widely circulated, he said. The claims about Holbrook's behavior, they became the focus. Laya gave a hollow laugh. El Lobo used to brag about that, how perfect it all worked out. The moment that story took hold, no one looked for either of us. A knock interrupted them. DuPont stepped in, her face grave, a folder in hand. Simon read the reports inside quickly. Debbie Carr had confessed. Overwhelmed by gambling debts, she'd accepted a deal with El Lobo and helped dispose of Holbrook's body. Trish Marraro had done the same, driven by her son's overwhelming medical bills. They convinced themselves Holbrook deserved it, Simon read from Trish's statement. Either you help us or you disappear like the others. That's what El Lobo told them. When you found Ray's body this morning, Laya said softly, they must have realized their time was up, tried to back out, and the cartel made sure they couldn't talk. Simon nodded grimly. The cartel couldn't afford loose ends. Another knock. A Mexican officer appeared at the door, speaking quietly in Spanish. Marisol Ortega had arrived. Laya froze. She's here? She crossed the border hours ago, Simon said. Customs fast-tracked everything. She's waited 16 years for this. He stood. Before we take you to her, the medical team should do a final check. After that, we'll move both of you to a secure location until the trial. They stepped out into the station's main room. Across the space, Simon spotted Debbie and Trish, being processed for transport, heads down, faces pale. They didn't look up. Then Simon saw her, Marisol Ortega, standing just inside the door, clutching a small purse. Grief and hope had aged her, but her eyes were sharp, still searching. And then she saw her. Mi cariño, my daughter, is it really you? Laya stepped forward slowly. Mama, I'm so sorry. I'm so broken. I'm not even... But Marisol was already moving, crossing the room and wrapping her arms around her daughter. No, she whispered. No, mi amor. Nothing that happened was your fault. You're my daughter. That's all that matters. We'll start again. There are people who can help us. They clung to each other, years of silence melting away in a flood of tears. Around them, hardened officers looked away to give them space. More than one wiped their eyes. Simon stepped close. Mrs. Ortega, he said gently, we've recovered dozens of women tonight. The DEA and Mexican authorities are already moving on cartel warehouses. Your daughter's testimony is going to help shut down an entire network. Marisol held Laya tighter. She survived. That's all that matters. We'll take her to the hospital for a full evaluation, Simon continued. You'll ride with her, of course. We'll have security around the clock, and then you'll both be moved to a safe house. Still holding hands, mother and daughter followed officers to the waiting transport. Before getting in, Laya turned to Simon. Her eyes, though tired, held something new, something whole. Detective, thank you for seeing who I was, not just what I became. Simon nodded. You were always Deputy Laya Ortega, a good officer, betrayed by people who should have protected you. Nothing that's happened changes that. They stepped into the vehicle together. Dawn was just beginning to break over the desert. The city behind them still slept, unaware that a 16-year nightmare had finally come to an end. The patrol car pulled away slowly, carrying a mother and daughter toward healing. And behind them, in the corridors of law and across international lines, the wheels of justice were finally turning. Simon stood quietly as the sun touched the edge of the sky. Because sometimes the truth gets buried in an abandoned outhouse, in a borderland brothel, in the lies of those sworn to serve. But truth, like hope, has a way of surviving. And sometimes, even in the darkest places, the lost can still be found.